Good afternoon, Scott Baker. I heard you speaking to yourself as you were speaking to the last group that you have a new tagline for Lead Better.
What did I call it?
You said a certain percentage, not going to say it out loud, less insight. Right?
Yeah.
I thought, well, maybe, we could refine that a little bit more. 50% less insight than ALD.
I see it. Yeah. Okay. All right. So Lead Better, our daily podcast, live for when it's live and on demand for when it's on demand, where we talk about the day's field notes. And in the 15 minutes, I think that still, minute per minute, it's still very valuable. And it certainly is a lot of fun. And we certainly do then understand the field note better. Now, in dealing with the content, because we were deep in the main platform content for the last hour. We did a whole live podcast right before this one. Not to exclude you folks. We're glad that you're here.
Right.
But there was some brilliant level of discussion. And I think you and I today can achieve at least 92% of that level of brilliance that was involved in that conversation.
Yes.
But part of that was just pointing to the fact that there is decades of wisdom that was involved in the folks that were involved in that conversation, that hopefully we're somewhat like that.
Yes.
So anyway, sorry that I'm belaboring this, but let's get to the field note, which is about your fallback position.
Yes. What is your fallback position? Great question to be asking anytime you're moving into any type of strategic planning, any type of decision that's coming up, really. And a lot of times we don't think of it. We think of like developing a plan A or a plan B. And many leaders might not think of, they might conflate the idea of what a fallback position is, but a fallback position is different than a plan B.
Yep. And I honestly think that that's one of the great values of this field note. Mainly, I don't know that I'd ever defined it that way in my mind, because we often think about negotiation and we think of I'd like this, but I'll accept this. And that's not really what this is. This is about when the whole thing crashes and burns. And so then you're like, oh no, what am I was counting on us getting to some agreement. But when you can't get to an agreement, are you ready for where that leaves you? And that's an interesting thing that I don't think probably a lot of leaders contemplate enough, and certainly I don't.
Right. Okay. So as a metaphor, maybe not a metaphor, but actually like a more simple explanation. If I'm going to go to downtown Dallas for a business meeting today, which is brought up in our comment section by someone who's trying to make the difference between what a plan A and a fallback position is. If I'm definitely needing to be face-to-face with a business meeting, my 3 different routes that Google Maps might give me on the way to downtown Dallas are my plan A, plan B, and plan C. But if something happens with the entire highway infrastructure preventing, or my car breaks down in the driveway, my backup plan is to have a phone call, or to quickly jump on a Zoom call, or to call and reschedule it, right?
Sure, right. Or in the case particularly for you in Dallas, let's say, depending on the time of the year, there's a trace of snowfall, just like a little light dusting.
Well, we only have one.
And no one is able to go anywhere at all for months at a time, because
there's only one snow truck in the entire DFW metroplex.
Right. So just thinking through, if the end of the world has happened, what dystopian reality will we then face?
Right. So that's an oversimplified example of like where we might go with that type of thing. But where this normally comes up is like when we're at the precipice of a decision, when we're wondering, and maybe these kind of decisions only happen once a quarter, once a year, where we're determining a very specific strategic direction. Maybe it's a merger acquisition kind of discussion. And then we're saying, okay, a lot of times when you get down the road in a conversation in an M&A discussion, if you get too deep into that, what your fallback position could actually mean real loss for the company if you don't follow through, because you've disseminated enough inside information to the person who's like thinking about being in partnership with you, that if you have to walk back the fact that you're not actually merging, there's a material loss that you have to accept. And when those types of things happen, like before you even get into those initial M&A discussions, before all the NDAs are signed, you had better kind of determine not just what your plan A, B, or C is on what the merger looks like, but what your fallback position is in case it falls apart. And so there, at every level of decision making, that type of like earnest notion of like, what should we do? Should we be making? And I think it's important, but it is interesting that I've never thought about it that way. I've never thought of those as, I've always thought about a plan B, but not this fallback position being something at a different level.
Yeah. Now, our field note has just the very friendly title of what's your fallback position. In the great negotiating book, Getting to Yes, Roger Fisher and the co-author, whose name I can never remember, they called it a BATNA, a best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Isn't there something else called BAFTA?
Yes.
What is that?
I think BAFTA might be one of the SAG actors unions.
Okay. Something like that.
Something like
Isn't
that.
Or is it the British Oscars? It could be that.
Could be. Okay.
Something like that.
Maybe I was right in the theater realm, right?
Yeah, right. We're close. So, but in any case, right, the best alternative to the negotiated agreement. But here's the thing that not only had I not been thinking about this idea of going in where you're making it a routine to just be thinking, what's my position if none of this happens? And obviously, if you're going to say, well, gosh, if I'm going to go in and negotiate to buy this car, but if I don't get this car, well, then we're not driving anywhere, right? I mean, it's not where it's at. The question here is, if you have a good idea of what your fallback position is, the value is that it gives you more confidence. And actually, if you're in an organization, whether it's an athletic team or other team, and you're going in and you say, well, look, we're going for this, but if this doesn't happen, here's where we are.
Right.
And sometimes that's a little bit of the old, like, just envision the worst case scenario, and you realize, we could probably live with that.
Right.
And so then you have a greater degree of confidence going into the actual negotiation because you've thought that through.
Right.
That's brilliant.
Right. And one of the most nervous times that people might actually individually come to this is around buying a car, right? You go in thinking, what's my plan when I'm going to make an offer? I'm going to try to negotiate down. I know that I'm not going to be able to negotiate exactly the way that I used to because cash offers don't mean anything in the car world anymore. And how do I have it? And maybe the backup position is really just saying, we're going to go shop around and we're actually going to leave, right? Just stepping away. And so if you and your wife or your partner, whoever it is you're buying the car with, because you have to have a good cop, bad cop in car negotiations these days, right? If you don't have it said ahead of time, like, we're actually going to be okay with leaving, right? Because that's the thing that maybe a salesperson that you're dealing with doesn't want you to leave the lot because they know that their percentage of closed sales goes down by 80% by every people who actually leave the lot. So my wife and I have said, we're going to do this. And we've actually, we've turned this into this thing where we're like, we'll show up at 11 a.m. and we'll definitely leave. No matter what, we're leaving. And we're going to say we're going to leave to go shop around, but we're really just leaving for lunch. And we're going to see if the salesperson is going to call us back while we're at lunch, right? And so that way we can kind of think through what our position is. So even if we don't exactly know what the position is, what we're going to say is we're going to create a gap, right? That gives us time. And it's mentioned early on in the field note that what we're really trying to do is increase our optionality here, right? And if the main thing that we need around our optionality is just a little bit more time, that's the thing that you need to build into this. And so even though it seems a little trivial that you brought up the idea of buying a car, I think these lessons are all over the place in the way that we treat this in our lives.
Yeah. However, in terms of our Lead Better conversations, many of them do involve Mikey and cars. And we could just start calling this Car Talk.
Yes.
And find the leadership and behavioral lessons that we can all learn, once we get inside a four-wheeled vehicle.
You said it as if there's a lot of people who are listening for the first time. It's not even at 10%. Yeah. It's not even close to 10%. So,
sure.
It's a very low number.
Listen, and obviously in this case, you've been doing it enough that you and your wife have a whole pattern.
Yes.
And maybe you even have favorite restaurants that you go to
it's always Whataburger. It's always Whataburger because that's the only restaurant. Okay. It's the only restaurant you can count on actually being there in Texas.
Okay, right. Yeah. And near all of the car dealerships, apparently.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I think my wife had taken her car in to get some service the other day, and then they were saying, here's a car, and very nice car, and they said, we'll give you, and they named this discount on this car, and it was the kind that you would go like, are you sure? Could you repeat that? Like you almost would have been shocked a little bit. The dealership had just changed hands, like there was a new owner of the dealership. Wow. And so you might have, and they were like, well, we're just trying to clear out some of the old stock. And so my wife called me and she goes, well, this is what they're offering me on this car. And it got my attention for half a second. And then I started to look into it and I realized, okay, it was last model year, and I'm not going to get into all the details, but I realized it's actually priced at about what the market value for that car would be. And so, because obviously if you drive any car off the lot, then it goes down a certain amount. But if you have a car, and this was a unique car, but it was like, yeah, it's not as good a deal as they made it sound. But I did go over, I did look at it, and then you could tell the salesperson was like ready. And I was like, right. Well, we'll think about it. And they sent one email to follow up, and didn't really get back to them, and it's right. Over. But then now what happened was, and I'm making this all car talk, the other day my wife had to take her car back in because the check engine light came on, and she was like, I don't think I want to go back to the dealership. And I was like, no, you can go. She goes, what if I see that salesperson that we didn't respond to? I was like, you don't have to be ashamed to go right. to be seen to the car dealership because you didn't buy that particular car. They still want you to like them. They're not going to like give you the side eye.
But that is the sign of a really good salesperson if they were able to do that within just a couple conversations.
I suppose. Yeah. So, all right, now in this idea of having the fallback position, we've talked about that it can increase your level of confidence in the actual negotiation you have because you've actually thought about, okay, well, here's the fallback. It's not that bad. Here's even what the worst thing that could happen, and we've thought that through, and okay, we're ready for that. But one of the other factors here is that if you've thought about that, it increases your ability to get right back on the horse, right? So that there's not this like, okay, we were counting on that, but now what do we do? Well, let's talk about that next week, and then we'll get a plan together. And all of a sudden, 3 weeks have gone by, and you haven't initiated any momentum in the direction that you wanted to go.
Right.
So here, with this kind of an approach, by having that fallback ready, you have the fallback, and so it's right back on the horse.
Right. And so you might take all of these lessons and think, okay, there needs to be a certain threshold for you to want to apply all these, like to always be like every decision needs a plan A, a plan B, and the fallback position. Seems like it's a bit of an overreach. And so we don't really need that for like the minor decisions in our life. There needs to be like a certain place where the major decisions absolutely need it, but not the, I think the more that I've read through this and kind of thought about what we were going to talk about, there's very few decisions where you wouldn't like have that kind of thing in mind, right? Where the fallback is, where the A, where the B is. And if you don't, it's the type of thing you should probably start thinking this way on all the minor ones. And then the major decisions will become second nature for you. I think it should be second nature for you in your minor decisions as well.
Well, yeah. And in fact, having that is you're developing that mental muscle of using the what if sort of thinking.
Right. So my kids just started their class schedules this day. For their freshman and sophomore years of high school, and they probably won't really get a good idea of what that decision was, but they provide a drop ad week, for everybody who wants to exercise a plan A or a plan B, or to like, completely drop out of it in some way. And so some of those things are built in for stuff like class schedules for students to understand that if they didn't think about that ahead of time, they've got a week to come up with those kinds of things. But there's, once you get out of school, there's not a whole lot of those things that come up. We do know some organizations who like, before you're there for 6 months, they try to, in a sense, get you to take, is it a plan B in this sense, or is it the backup? They're actually getting you to take the fallback position by accepting a payout by saying, we're not going to pursue my time in this company, right? So they're basically buying you out with a perk to say, go ahead and quit because you can't do it. Right. And what does, what's the purpose behind that is really about so that they don't get into a position where it's awkward for them to have to fire you right?
I guess. I
So
suppose I would.
maybe it's their own fallback position, but they're presenting it as if it's the employee's fallback choice, right? And then it becomes a
Interesting.
very
Yes, that's a
comfortable
good
fallback
point.
choice.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have your own well thought out fallback position, you're going to have lower anxiety in your negotiation. You're going to have a greater decisiveness in the negotiation. All right, this isn't going to work, but thanks. Hey, it's been really nice. Like you're not going to muddle around.
Right.
So
right. Exactly.
All right. Thank you.
I love this conversation, and we'll talk tomorrow. I look forward to yesterday. You teased yesterday's field note already in the previous discussion.
Yes, it's on dealing with colleagues who are very utilitarian.
Yeah. So it sounds insidious even without that dangerous tone that you gave it to. All right.
All right. Good.
We'll talk tomorrow. Bye now.